All right, so welcome everyone. This is the open house neighborhood meeting for the 2024 Central Avenues improvements. As Eric said, my name is Nick Amatucci. I'll be project manager with Bolton and Mink. We'll be recording this presentation tonight and uploading it to the project website so it can be accessed at a later date. So most of you already know the project area, but just to recap, we're kind of have two different project areas a little bit. Half the project is full street and utility reconstruction. That's shown in red on this map. That includes 7th Avenue North, 8th Avenue North, and 3rd Street North. And then the area in blue is just a pavement resurfacing part of the project area, which includes the southern block of 6th Avenue North, 1st Street North, and 2nd Street North. So one of the main reasons we're doing this project is because the pavement condition is poor. Most of you have probably seen this. There's cracking, patching throughout the neighborhood as shown on the pictures on the left, especially in the reconstruction area of the neighborhood. And then the picture on the bottom right shows what a fully reconstructed road will look like shortly after it's done. This is actually 8th Avenue between 1st and 2nd Street that was done in 2012 with new curb, new pavement, and new sidewalk. So each street in the reconstruction area will generally get narrowed a little bit for a few reasons. Main reason is to calm traffic, narrow roads, calm traffic, and reduce speeds. And that was a big complaint by a lot of the residents in the neighborhood. And it also creates a bigger boulevard space for boulevard trees, snow storage, and pedestrian safety. So on 8th Avenue from 2nd Street to Minnetonka Mills, the existing width is 31 feet. The proposed width is going to be 28 feet from curb face to curb face. 7th Avenue North from the southern limits to 1st Street North, that's going to stay about the same width. One reason being because it's only half a block, so we don't want to switch the width halfway through a block. And then the second reason being it's so close to Main Street in the commercial area. But then everything north of 1st Street on 7th Avenue will get narrowed by about 3 to 4 feet, down to 32 feet. 3rd Street North will also be narrowed a little bit from 29.5 feet to 28 feet wide. And then 6th Avenue North, Main Street to 1st Street. Again, this is just a resurfacing area. We'll be reclaiming this road, so grinding up the existing pavement and underlying aggregate base material and using that material to make a new base layer and pave over with new asphalt pavement. And then on 1st and 2nd Streets from 5th Avenue to 8th Avenue, we will be doing a mill and overlay. So we'll be milling off the top 2 inches of the existing pavement and then resurfacing it with new asphalt pavement. So in addition to the street improvements, we'll also be improving the drainage. A big way to do this is replacing the curb and gutter and installing curb and gutter where there is none today, or there's just kind of the block curb or bituminous curb. So we'll be putting in new curb and gutter on all the reconstructed streets on 3rd Street, 7th Avenue, and 8th Avenue, which will help improve drainage and get the stormwater to where it needs to be, to those storm catch basin inlets, which is shown in the bottom left picture. We'll also be adding more of those inlets in spots where there's isolated drainage points and the area is just too flat, that we need to kind of create a low point and add more of those inlets, and extending storm sewer pipe where needed to get to those inlets. Also, a lot of the intersections will be adding a lot of these inlets to help the efficiency of the drainage during a large stormwater event. So, utility improvements will include the replacement of sanitary sewer and water main under the street on 7th and 8th Avenue. So sanitary sewer, the old clay pipe will be replaced with new plastic PVC pipe. And then for the water main, the old cast iron pipe, which is a brittle pipe and pushing probably 70 years old, is going to be replaced with new ductile iron pipe, which is a more durable pipe, and also upsized from 6 inches to 8 inches in diameter to help with fire flows. And then wherever the sewer and water main is replaced on 7th and 8th Avenue, most of the properties along these streets will also be getting a sewer and water service line replaced from the main in the street to the city's right-of-way line, which is just beyond the public sidewalk. From that point to the house, we're not doing any work as part of the project, but individual properties may choose to replace that line or rehabilitate that line with a private contractor or plumber. That would be up to the individual property owner, and it might be because of old material that's falling apart or material that's not meeting plumbing code anymore. And the project team would let you know if that was the case, and would also work with your contractor on timing of replacement if needed. We will have to unfortunately remove some boulevard trees throughout the neighborhood, some blocks more than others. We try to save as many trees as possible, but a lot, we're working in tight spaces and lots of times it's just not feasible. There's four main reasons for removing boulevard trees. One is that they're an ash tree, but these should have already been removed by Public Works throughout the neighborhood. The other is trees that are in poor health, so they're dying or diseased. The third reason is they're in conflict with the utilities underground, mainly those sewer and water service lines. Unfortunately, a lot of times these water and sewer lines go directly under a tree or right adjacent to a tree. So when we're replacing those lines, we just can't save that tree. And then also conflict with road construction or grading. This would be for any trees that are basically overgrowing the boulevard space. They're pushing up the curb, pushing up the street. The roots are just getting under the sidewalk. It's just kind of time they've overgrown that space. But any tree that is removed will be replaced at the end of the project. All residents that have a proposed tree getting removed in front of their property should have received a letter recently about why the tree's getting removed, and then giving them options on what species they would want planted back at the end of the project. So moving on from the kind of the scope of the project into budget and special assessments. Sure, most of you, if not all of you here, received a special assessment notice for the assessment hearing next week. So there are a total of 148 properties to be assessed in the project area. Almost all of these, all but one, are single-family residential properties. And then 44 of those properties actually have a lower assessment than normal due to assessments back in 2012. I'll get into that in a few slides here. The total special assessment amount used to fund the project will be $769,000. And this is distributed to all 148 properties. But that's just a kind of a small portion of the total estimated project cost, which is $6 million. $5 million of that is the actual construction costs based on the low bids we received about a month ago. And then $1 million roughly is engineering and administration costs. So the other funding sources besides the special assessments at just under $1 million is the city's utility funds and the city's bonds and general taxes. So special assessment policies, to recap the policies that why and how we assess for projects. So assessments are proposed for any streets that are fully reconstructed. So for this project is 7th Avenue, 8th Avenue, and 3rd Street. There are no assessments for pavement resurfacing and maintenance projects. So for this project, that would be 6th Avenue, 1st Street, and 2nd Street. The street assessment is calculated based on 70% of the total street improvement cost. This will vary based on each property's front footage. So a larger lot would receive a bigger street assessment. However, this assessment is also subject to a cap on how much we assess per foot. So it winds up not actually being the 70% of the actual construction costs. It winds up being a lower amount, and I'll get into that in a little bit here as well. Streets with no adjacent property addresses. So typically those side streets in Hopkins, 3rd Street for this project will need to be distributed to properties 1 block south and north in the project area. There's no assessment for utility mains, so nothing for sanitary sewer main, water main, or storm sewer mains. However, there is a small assessment for the utility services for the water service and sanitary sewer service replacement. 50% of the actual costs that were bid are assessed to residential properties, and then 100% of the actual bid costs are assessed to commercial properties. So, well, I'll get into that. So total assessment is the utility assessment plus the street assessment. So kind of to visualize how the assessments are distributed, this is the map of all the properties being assessed. The purple and blue properties are getting that kind of typical frontage assessment for those reconstructed streets. The tan properties are being assessed for just the third street, side street assessment at a unit rate. And then all the properties that are also kind of highlighted in red, hatched in red there, they also received an assessment back in 2012 for the work on Minnetonka Mills Road and or 3rd Street North between 8th and 9th Avenue. So those properties will have generally a lower assessment than the rest, since if they were to have their street done back in 2012, they would have already paid that cap amount and wouldn't have had to pay double. Just like a lot of the properties now aren't having to pay double for 3rd Street and 7th Avenue or 8th Avenue. So we're taking what they already paid in 2012 into account into their assessment. And I'll explain that a little bit too. So those special assessment caps, the cap for this year, the front foot rate cap is $106.14 per front foot for single family properties. This is increased by 3% every year. The front footage is also capped at 125 feet. So say there's a property at 150 feet, we would only calculate up to 125 feet for their assessment. Caps don't apply to commercial properties, but we do take benefit appraisals for those properties. And then we compare the benefit appraisal to what the city policy would be, and then you use the lower amount of the two. Final assessments have been mailed out to everyone receiving assessment for the project. Assessments for a typical 50-foot lot on 7th or 8th Avenue, I'd say most of the lots are 50 feet wide on these blocks, is just under $7,000. $5,300 is for the street assessment, and then just over $800 for the water and just over $800 for the sewer assessment. This is a reduction from the preliminary assessments that were mailed out in the fall of about $1,600 for most of the properties on 7th and 8th Avenue. This was due to lower utility bid prices than anticipated. Assessments did not increase for any property due to these favorable bid prices. Not everyone saw the decrease in $1,600, but nobody's assessment increased. So I'm going to go through a few examples of how the assessments are calculated. So this example just happens to be at 210 7th Avenue North. This is one of the, what I would call a typical property and the most common assessment amount for the reconstruction area. So the street assessment per the cap is calculated at $106.14 per foot, and they have a 50-foot frontage. So you multiply 50 feet by $106.14 and get the amount of $5,307. Their water service is being replaced. So we take 50% of the actual bid amount of $1,673 and get $836.50 that the homeowner needs to contribute to. And then same for the sewer service. Their sewer service is being replaced. So you take 50% of the as bid amount, get $834.25. Now, the water and sewer services, those are getting an assessment because the homeowner does own the water and sewer service from the main all the way to the house. And we have to replace these when we're replacing the main in the street. So typically the homeowner will be responsible for all the costs of the services, but we realize that it's kind of being forced on people since we're doing the mains. So the city is covering half the costs and assessing the other half to the residents. And $800 for 30 feet of water service is a good deal. So example 2, this is basically the same as example 1 with one minor difference. So this is just a block south at 110 7th Avenue North. Same type of work is happening in front of their property, same footage, but you see that it's a slightly lower assessment amount. That's because this property and several of the properties right around this area aren't getting their sewer service replaced, because a half a block of 7th Avenue already had the sewer main replaced about 20, 30 years ago. So it's newer PVC pipe that we don't need to replace. So their assessment's about $800 lower than their neighbors to the north at $6,143.50. This third example is probably the most complicated, so bear with me. This is one of the properties that received an assessment back in 2012 for the work on Minnetonka Mills Road. So this is 315 8th Avenue North, but kind of this whole block has this going on. So normally you take the street assessment per the cap at the front footage. In this case, they have 55 feet of front footage. So their assessment for this project should be, or for the street, $5,837.70. However, back in 2012, they paid $2,242.57 for the work on Minnetonka Mills Road, just like some people are getting assessed for the work on 3rd Street on 6th Avenue and 5th Avenue this year. If they would have paid, this property would have paid at the assessment cap at that 2012 rate, which was considerably lower at $74.45 per foot, they would have paid just over $4,000 that year if they would have had 8th Avenue reconstructed with Minnetonka Mills. So we take that into account, see, okay, what percentage did they pay of that cap amount back in 2012? And that was just over 54%. So the remaining percentage owed on this year's cap is just over 45%. So we take that percentage, multiply it by the street assessment that they should be getting, that $5,800, and you get $2,600, $2,640.57. So that's their new street assessment. So that's how we did that for a lot of those properties on 8th Avenue and I think half of them on 7th Avenue too. Then they're also getting a new water service, a new sewer service. So you add those in, you get a total assessment cost at $4,311.32. So I know that was a lot. If any of you are in that situation, want to talk to me after, I'd be happy to do so. And then the last example, probably the simplest calculation, this is at 242 6th Avenue North. This is the same for that 200 block of 6th Avenue and 5th Avenue that are receiving assessments for the work on 3rd Street, but they're not getting assessed for anything on their actual streets because no work is happening on their streets. It's just for the work on 3rd Street since they're a block south of it. So the 3rd Street North total project cost is just over $500,000. And we take 70% of that because that's the amount that we assess to properties. And then there are 97 total properties, 1 block north and south of 3rd Street between 5th and 8th Avenue North. So we take that $350,000, divide by the 97 properties, and you get $3,652.67 per property. No water service replacement, no sewer service replacement. So their total assessment is that $3,600 amount. So there's 4 options to pay assessments. The first option is to prepay in full or part without any interest until July 31st of this year. The second option after July 31st, if you pay between then and November 15th, you'd have to pay with some interest, but only to that date of payment. So pretty minimal interest amount. Third option, which is the most popular option because you don't need to do anything, it automatically rolls onto Hennepin County taxes after November 15th. It will be paid annually over a 15-year period with an interest rate of what we're anticipating to be about 6.5%. Now, this is not confirmed. We won't know this until later in April when the city sells their bonds. And we'll notify everyone with a reminder letter on how to pay for assessments and what that actual interest rate is. The fourth option, the least popular option, is to defer assessments, which is to pay at a later date, and interest would continue to accrue while you defer the assessments. And to qualify for this, you'd have to apply with the city each year and be a homestead property. Property owner would have to have an income limit of $46,831. And the owner would have to be either 65 years or older, active military, or full-time disability. And again, you'd have to apply with the city each year you'd want to defer assessments. And again, that interest rate is assumed. We should know that later in April though. So here's an example payment schedule for that typical amount for along 7th and 8th Avenue of just under $7,000 total assessment amount at a 6.5% interest rate over a 15-year period. You can see the annual principal stays the same and the interest reduces. So this is not like a mortgage where the total amount stays the same and the principal goes up, interest goes down. So the total amount actually goes down over the years. So the first year you'd be looking at a little over $1,000, but then by that 15th year, it'd be under $500 added to your taxes. So total interest added of about $3,800 on top of the principal amount for a total of $10,832. So moving on to, hopefully I didn't bore people too much with assessments, and we can certainly talk about that more afterwards if you got specific questions about your properties. But moving on to kind of project schedule and more of the construction process here. So tonight we're having our final neighborhood meeting. Next Tuesday is at the regular city council meeting right in this room. We'll be conducting the public hearing on assessments, asking council to consider adopting the assessment role and awarding the contract to the low bidder. Then construction would likely start in April this year with the warm weather we're having, and then wrap up in October, or perhaps sooner if they get an early start. Final punch list cleanup items may go into November and even the following spring, though. Here is a preliminary construction phasing plan, which you might have saw as walking into the room. This is tentative right now, but this is kind of what we're thinking, the order of construction, how this will go. We are meeting with the contractor in a couple of weeks to get their actual schedule. And once we get that, we'll send out a newsletter with actual anticipated dates for each phase. But right now, we're anticipating that the first phase that the contractor would start on 7th Avenue, south of 2nd Street. So those first two blocks of 7th Avenue. And then when they wrap up the utility work, maybe after a month or so, they would move on to 8th Avenue and a portion of 3rd Street. And then from there, go over to the rest of 7th Avenue, those north 2 blocks of 7th Avenue and the eastern 2 blocks of 3rd Street. And then the last 2 phases, phase 4A and 4B, would be those resurfacing areas of 6th Avenue North, 1st Street and 2nd Street. 4A or 6th Avenue North might be done the same time as one of those earlier phases, such as phase 2 or 3. But phase 4B, 1st and 2nd Street, will almost definitely be at the very end, and would be done while we do the final layer of pavement on all other phases as well. So while the whole project, the entire project area will be under construction for the whole summer or most of the summer and into the fall, your block or your phase will be under construction for about half the summer or 3 months. So not every block will be opened up at the same time. Each phase will kind of go under the same process, at least for the reconstruction area. So there'll be about 4 weeks of pavement removals and utility construction, including the sanitary sewer replacement, water main, sewer and water services, and storm sewer installation. Then once the utilities are done, they would start on rebuilding the roadway, first with excavation and grading of the base material, installing the concrete curb and gutter and the concrete driveways, and then paving that first layer of asphalt. Then there'll be a few weeks of boulevard restoration to get things back to the way they were, essentially. So pouring the concrete sidewalks back in, paving any asphalt driveways, repairing any irrigation and invisible dog fences that were broken or damaged during the construction process, and restoring the turf, so placing down topsoil and sod. Then at the end of the project, there'd be 2 to 4 weeks of final cleanup and final paving. This will include some miscellaneous work, including new signs. The tree planting will happen all in the fall. Manhole castings will get raised up, and then just kind of final cleanup work before the final layer of asphalt is paved in the roadway. Then there will be some striping as well, putting down pavement markings for new crosswalk, new fog lines. I should mention on 1st Street North, we're going to be putting in fog lines or shoulder striping to kind of feel like the roadway is a little narrow, to help with reducing speeds there as well. There will be some impacts and access restrictions during construction, but the product team is here to help you guys through that and try to make it as seamless as possible. Some of the private utilities out there, so the gas, power company, cable, phone company, there will be some relocations that will need to occur prior to and during construction. Luckily for this project, it's not going to be a lot. There's a few blocks of gas main and several power poles, but not much else. There may be some unplanned or planned outages that would occur during construction for these companies, but if it's unplanned, it can be reported directly to that utility company, or get a hold of one of us, one of the project team, and we can try to coordinate that as well. There will be some temporary water shutdowns for most of the neighborhood. When there is a temporary water shutdown, it would be for 4 to 6 hours or so. You'd be getting a notice at least 24 hours in advance, letting you know when that time is to plan for it. And then we would also be setting up a temporary water system above ground for those properties on 7th and 8th Avenue that will be out of water for 3 to 4 weeks when we're replacing the water main, but you'll have water from the temporary water system. So that will make that seamless and also avoid multiple water shutdowns. There will be no planned disruption to sewer service for most of the neighborhood. Temporary access restrictions would include utility excavations. We will be 10 feet plus deep on some of these utility excavations. So when we're doing that in front of one of your driveways, you're not going to be able to get into your driveway, obviously. But that's a moving operation, and it's only during the working hours, which are 7 to 7, Monday through Friday. Every night, they're required to backfill those excavations and make it a drivable surface to get to your driveways. And then if your driveway's off the alley, that'll be obviously easier access, and we'll make sure that one of the alley entrances are open, either the north or south end at all times. Concrete curb and driveway aprons. You'll have to be, if you do have a driveway apron that's getting replaced, when that occurs, you'll be getting a notice, again, probably 24 hours in advance of when that curb's getting put down, and then you'll have to be out of your driveway for roughly 7 days to let that concrete cure or harden before you can drive back in. Landscaping and retaining walls, there have been notices that have been sent out to a lot of properties already about potential impacts to landscaping and retaining walls. For landscaping, in general, the city does not replace plantings within the right-of-way or just abutting the right-of-way, but we're trying to coordinate in case you do want to save any of that. You can move that ahead of time. Retaining walls, we would salvage and reinstall or replace if they can't be salvaged. Same with steps and things like that. But yeah, if you have any special access needs, I'm sure there's going to be some in the neighborhood, or special events or things where you need to get out certain times, just let the construction staff know, let me know, and we'll coordinate that. We can't always say we're going to stop construction or anything like that, but we can usually work around it and make sure you can get out of your driveway if you need to. We have a project website, if you didn't know already, hopkins-2024.com, where things like this presentation will be on there. Our contact information will be on there. You can sign up for project updates via email or text or both. These project updates will be sent out on a weekly basis, typically during the construction process. Possibly more if there's special events going on. And then newsletters will be mailed to properties on a monthly basis. And then notices will be delivered door to door as needed for more property specific items like access restrictions and water shutdowns. There'll be a project helpline set up at 952-236-3998, where Emily or one of our other project communication specialists will be there to help answer questions or direct you to one of the other project team members to answer your question. For more immediate needs, some of our construction staff, Josh Robbie, who's sitting in the back here tonight, is our construction manager. And then Jamie Hand, who's also here tonight, will be our construction inspector or project representative. Jamie will be kind of boots on the ground there pretty much every day that the contractor's working. So for more urgent items, they would be good contacts. And of course, you can contact myself too, for any project related items. And then Eric, the city engineer, who you met earlier, can be contacted for more city specific items if you